History's full of epic moments, but let's be honest, nothing beats a good old-fashioned brawl. Whether it's knights throwing tantrums or entire cities losing their cool, these fights were pure chaos. Grab some popcorn, history's about to get messy. The Sandbar Duel. A brawl turned legend. On a crisp September day in 1827, Samuel Wells and Thomas Maddox, two men with a mutual dislike that had simmered for years, arrived on a small sandbar in the middle of the Mississippi River. Both men had grown tired of shouting matches and unresolved grudges, so they agreed to settle things the old-fashioned way, a duel with pistols. Each brought 5 supporters, which, in hindsight, was probably their first mistake. Among the supporters, tensions were even higher than between the duelists. The most notorious of them was Jim Bowie, a large, tough man with a reputation as a schemer. He had a personal score to settle with Major Norris Wright, one of Maddox's supporters. Their feud had started a year earlier when Wright accused Bowie of being a fraud and denied him a bank loan. When Bowie confronted Wright in a bar, Wright shot at him. The bullet, miraculously, was stopped by a coin pouch in Bowie's vest. Bowie retaliated by biting Wright's hand so hard he left a tooth behind. After that encounter, Bowie vowed never to be caught unarmed again and had a massive hunting knife custom-made, a blade that would later become the famous Bowie knife. When it came time for the duel, Wells and Maddox stood apart with their seconds, pistols in hand. At the signal, both fired, and both missed. Undeterred, they reloaded and fired again. Once more, neither man hit his mark. By then, the two duelists realized that this whole thing was a bad idea. They decided to shake hands, call it a draw, and move on with their lives. But peace wasn't in the cards. As Wells and Maddox were explaining the truce to their supporters, things took a nasty turn. One of Wells's men, General Cooney, decided it was time to settle an old grudge with Robert Crane, Maddox's second. Cooney taunted Crane, and before anyone could stop it, Crane fired the pistol he was still holding. The shot missed Cooney but hit Jim Bowie in the hip, knocking him to the ground. From there, chaos erupted. Guns were drawn, shots were fired, and within seconds, the sandbar turned into a battlefield. Cooney fired back at Crane, hitting him in the arm, but Crane managed to return fire, seriously injuring Cooney. Meanwhile, Bowie, despite being wounded, unsheathed his massive knife and staggered to his feet, determined to join the fight. Major Wright, spotting his nemesis, Bowie dazed and vulnerable, charged at him and fired. Bowie dodged at the last second, and a friend tossed him a pistol. Bowie shot Wright, wounding him, but Wright fought back, stabbing Bowie in the chest with a sword cane. Bowie, now bleeding heavily, grabbed Wright's collar, pulled himself up, and plunged his knife into Wright's heart, killing him on the spot. Even after Wright fell, the fight wasn't over. Wright's friends, the Blanchard brothers, opened fire on Bowie, hitting him in the arm, but Bowie, refusing to go down, slashed one of the brothers, injuring him enough to drive them off. The gunfire eventually subsided as the original duelists managed to restore some order. In the span of just 90 seconds, 2 men lay dead, several others were wounded, and Jim Bowie had become a legend. Though he was severely injured, Bowie survived, and the knife he used that day became iconic. The Sandbar Duel wasn't just a fight. It was the moment that cemented the Bowie knife as one of the most famous weapons in American history. This wasn't just a simple duel. It was a story of grudges, chaos, and survival that became the stuff of legend. Musashi versus the Yoshioka school, a duel that became legend. In the spring of 1604, a 21-year-old wandering swordsman named Miyamoto Musashi arrived in Kyoto. He wasn't there to sightsee. He came to challenge the Yoshioka school, one of Japan's most prestigious swordsmanship schools. The Yoshioka family had once served as private instructors to the powerful Ashikaga shoguns, and their reputation was unmatched. But Musashi had a personal reason for this challenge. His father, Munisai, had dueled the school's founder, Yoshioka Kempo, years earlier, and defeated him twice in 3 bouts. Now Musashi sought to prove he was just as skilled as his father by taking on the Yoshioka's finest. The school's head, Yoshioka Seijuro, accepted Musashi's challenge. For the Yoshioka family, this was an opportunity to avenge their founder's earlier defeat. The duel was set for March 8, 1604, near the Rendaiji Temple, with wooden swords as the agreed weapon. On the day of the duel, Seijuro arrived on time, but Musashi was nowhere to be seen. Hours passed, and Seijuro grew impatient. Finally, Musashi arrived late, adding insult to injury. Seijuro, flustered and angry, quickly engaged him. But the duel ended in one swift move. Musashi shattered Seijuro's shoulder with a powerful strike, leaving him unable to wield a sword ever again. Humiliated, Seijuro retired, gave up his school, and became a monk. Musashi had achieved his first victory, but his actions threw the Yoshioka school into chaos. Seijuro's younger brother, Yoshioka Denshichiro, stepped up to restore the family's honor. He challenged Musashi to a second duel, which Musashi accepted. On the day of the duel, Musashi used the same tactic, arriving late and unsettling his opponent. When Musashi finally appeared, Denshichiro, furious and wielding a massive 5-foot wooden sword, attacked him immediately. But Musashi swiftly countered. He caught Denshichiro's weapon, ripped it from his hands, and used it to beat him to death. The Yoshioka family was left in tatters, their second master slain by the wandering swordsman. With their reputation in ruins, the Yoshioka school made a desperate move. They appointed Seijuro's 12-year-old son, Yoshioka Matashichiro, as the new head of the school and issued a final challenge to Musashi. The duel was set to take place under the famous Sagari Matsu pine tree near the Ichijoji temple. Musashi, however, suspected a trap. He arrived early and hid, observing as the Yoshioka family and their followers arrived, not for a duel, but an ambush. Armed with swords, bows, and rifles, they planned to kill him. Before they could act, Musashi sprang from his hiding spot, shouting, "Musashi awaits you!" In one swift motion, he cut down the young Matashichiro, ending the Yoshioka lineage as masters of swordsmanship. Enraged by the death of their young master, the Yoshioka followers attacked. First, the students charged at Musashi, but they were quickly defeated. Archers fired arrows, one grazing Musashi's sleeve. Drawing his second sword, Musashi unleashed his now famous two-sword fighting style, cutting down anyone who dared to face him. One by one, he defeated his attackers, killing at least 10 before the rest fled in terror. News of Musashi's destruction of the Yoshioka school spread across Japan. His victories cemented his reputation as one of the greatest swordsmen in history. This series of duels not only showcased his unmatched skill but also introduced his unique two-sword technique, later known as Niten Ichi-ryu, two heavens as one. The Yoshioka school once revered was no more. Musashi's journey in Kyoto had ended, but his legend was just beginning. The Combat of the 30. The tale of the Combat of the 30 begins in the early 14th century, during a time of political struggle in Brittany. When Duke John II of Brittany passed away in 1341, he left behind a major problem. He did not leave an heir to the throne. This caused a fierce dispute between two men who both wanted to rule. One of them was Jean de Montfort, the Duke's half-brother, and the other was Charles of Blois, who was married to the Duke's niece. This disagreement quickly escalated into a full-blown war, known as the Brittany War of Succession. The war was not just a family dispute, though. It quickly became part of the much larger and ongoing conflict between France and England, known as the 100 Years' War. France supported Charles, while England backed Jean. The war dragged on for years, with both sides fighting over control of Brittany. It was not just about the land. It was also about honor and proving who had the rightful claim to the throne. Battles raged across the region, and many lives were lost. After a while, the war reached a temporary standstill. The Pope, hoping to stop the violence, arranged a truce between the two sides. While this peace seemed like good news, it actually left many knights on both sides feeling frustrated and restless. The knights had spent so many years fighting, and now they had nothing to do. For these warriors, their identity was tied to their ability to fight and win battles. Without wars to fight, they felt like they had no way to show their skill or prove their honor. In the midst of this uneasy peace, a French knight named Jean de Beaumanoir decided to challenge an English knight named Robert Bemborough to a duel. Beaumanoir wanted to prove that he was the stronger fighter and gain recognition for his skill. However, Bemborough had a different idea. Instead of one-on-one combat, he suggested something much grander, a large-scale duel, where 30 knights from each side would fight against each other. The idea was not just about a small fight. It would be a chance for both sides to show their might in front of a crowd, and the knights could earn glory for their side. What made it even more interesting was that the fight would have no prizes, no treasure, and no land at stake. It was simply about showing who had the superior knights. Beaumanoir liked the idea, and both sides agreed to this challenge. Soon, both sides began preparing for the epic battle. Beaumanoir gathered a team of 30 knights, all loyal to Charles of Blois, the French candidate for the throne of Brittany. On the other side, Robert Bembaro gathered his team, made up of English knights, a few Bretons who supported Jean de Montfort, and even German mercenaries. The knights were skilled warriors who were known for their bravery, and many of them had fought in earlier battles during the 100 Years' War. Both sides were determined to win, not just for themselves, but for their countries and their leaders. The rules for the battle were simple but strict. 30 knights would fight from each side. There would be no retreating or running away during the fight, and the battle would end only when one side was defeated or forced to surrender. The knights would fight with swords, axes, and lances, using their skills and strength to try and overpower each other. The battle was meant to be a fair test of bravery and skill, with no interruptions or outside interference. The day of the combat of the 30 finally arrived on March 26, 1351. The knights met in a field called Half Oak, where the battle would take place. Before heading to the battlefield, both sides attended church to confess their sins, pray for strength, and prepare for the violence ahead. When the battle started, the two sides charged at each other, clashing in a whirlwind of swords, shields, and horses. The noise of the battle was deafening as knights shouted war cries and swung their weapons. The ground became slippery with mud and blood as the knights fought fiercely. Horses were knocked down, and knights were thrown off their mounts into the thick mud. The fighting was brutal, and the knights gave it their all, determined to prove their bravery and skill. After an hour of intense fighting, both sides called for a brief pause. The knights were exhausted, and many were injured. The break allowed them to catch their breath, tend to their wounds, and repair their armor. Once the break was over, the fight continued with even more intensity. At this point, many knights were weakened by injuries, but their determination to fight on was stronger than ever. Robert Bembaro, the leader of the English side, fought valiantly, but he was eventually killed by a French knight. His death was a significant blow to the English knights, as Bembaro had been their leader and a powerful figure in the battle. Without their leader, the English knights struggled to regroup. They were soon overwhelmed by the superior numbers and determination of the French side. Eventually, the English knights had no choice but to surrender. When the battle ended, the French had won, but at a heavy cost. 9 knights from the English side and 5 knights from the French side had died during the fight. The survivors, many of whom were badly wounded, were captured and later ransomed for money. The battle was brutal, but it became famous across Europe for the courage and honor displayed by the knights involved. In the end, the combat of the 30 was a reminder of how important honor, skill, and bravery were to the knights of medieval Europe. The battle was a violent one, but it was also a celebration of the knightly spirit and the courage of those who fought for their cause, their king, and their country. And there you have it, some of the most epic brawls in history, where warriors proved their bravery and skill. If you enjoyed these incredible stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more epic content. Thanks for watching.